Humanity learned first that the universe did not care. It did not hate, did not judge, did not even notice. Stars burned whether anyone watched them, and worlds shattered whether anyone mourned them. That lesson was written in radiation scars on hull plating, in the names etched onto memorial alloys, and in the long, careful protocols that governed every breath taken beyond a planetary sky. The second lesson came later and hurt more. The universe might not care, but the things living in it very much did, and some of them decided that humanity was inconvenient. The ship called Far Horizon crossed the tidal boundary of the Garial expanse with engines throttled low, not out of caution, but out of habit. Its crew had learned that fear wasted more resources than preparation. The expanse itself was a region of warped spacetime left behind by the collapse of an ancient stellar cluster, a place where navigation computers stuttered and causality occasionally arrived late to its own appointments. Long before humanity, someone else had tried to harvest it and failed spectacularly. The evidence was still there in the form of drifting megastructural debris that no one had been able to identify with confidence. Far Horizon slid past those broken relics without slowing, its hull plates marked by 100 expeditions that had taught it the difference between the unknown and the threatening. Inside, the bridge was quiet in the way that only veteran crews could manage. Consoles glowed with controlled color, the soft hum of field regulators forming a background rhythm that everyone's body had learned to ignore. The ship was not beautiful by civilian standards. Every curve had been sacrificed to function, every aesthetic flourish shaved away to make room for redundancy. It had been built during the long outreach, when humanity was still optimistic enough to believe that being useful would make it welcome. At the central station stood the officer responsible for deciding whether a mistake would become a story or a statistic. Their name was Sira Kime, a name chosen by parents who believed that brevity implied resilience. Sira had been born under a sky-tinted orange by atmospheric filtration towers and had never once believed that nature was benevolent. That belief had served them well. They watched the expanse unfold across layered projections, eyes flicking between probability cones and sensor returns that contradicted each other with cheerful disregard for logic. Gravimetric variance increasing by 0.03, reported the navigation specialist, a person whose hands moved with unconscious precision over tactile controls. Nothing we cannot compensate for. Sira nodded, not bothering with verbal acknowledgement. Compensation was not the point. Survival was. Humanity had survived by learning that control was an illusion and adaptation was not. The Far Horizon carried that philosophy in every bulkhead seam and power conduit. It was a research vessel by charter, an explorer by mandate, and a warship by necessity. Those labels were not mutually exclusive anymore. The first sign that this crossing would be different did not come from sensors, but from the crew themselves. A pressure behind the eyes, a subtle distortion of depth perception, the sensation that the ship was moving slightly sideways relative to itself. Medical theory called it spatial dissonance response, an artifact of the human brain trying to reconcile contradictory inputs. Sira called it a warning. They had felt it before, on the edge of places where reality had been badly treated. Log the onset, Sira said. No changes to course. If something wants to announce itself, it will do so whether we flinch or not. That was when the stars went wrong. They did not disappear. That would have been comprehensible. They rearranged themselves, shifting into patterns that made no astronomical sense, clustering too tightly in some regions and leaving voids where light should have been. The navigation display attempted to correct, then gave up and flagged the data as unresolvable. Far Horizon continued on momentum alone, its inertial systems maintaining a path that no longer corresponded to any external reference. "Contact," said the sensor officer, voice steady in a way that spoke of effort. "Not electromagnetic, not gravitational. It is like the absence of a category." Sira exhaled slowly. "Range, everywhere and nowhere," came the reply, I am not being poetic. That is what the data says. Humanity had encountered non-human intelligences before. Some were microbial, some machine-derived, some expansive enough to have opinions about star systems. All of them obeyed rules, even if those rules were unfamiliar. This felt different. This felt like an intelligence that had not been forced to learn compromise. The first message did not arrive as sound or image. It arrived as certainty, a shared understanding imposed on every conscious mind aboard the far horizon, bypassing language centers and cultural filters with surgical indifference. You are transient, it conveyed. You are inefficient. You will be repurposed or removed. Several crew members gasped. One laughed sharply before clamping down on the response. Sierra felt anger rise, not hot and uncontrolled, but cold and focused. Inefficient was a word used by things that had never had to make do. This is Captain Kime of the Far Horizon, Sierra said aloud, not because they believed the entity needed sound, but because ritual mattered. We are not available for repurposing. State your designation and intent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stars shifted again, collapsing into a shape that hurt to look at, not because it was grotesque, but because it suggested dimensions that human vision was not equipped to process. The certainty returned, layered now with something like curiosity. Designation is irrelevant. Intent is optimization. You occupy volume and consume energy. Your processes are statistically suboptimal. Funny, Sierra said. That is exactly what the universe said about you once. The bridge went very still. Humanity's encounters with ancient intelligences had taught a painful lesson. Age did not imply wisdom, and power did not imply context. The thing in the expanse was old. That did not mean it understood struggle. It had likely never known limitation. We have no record of such a statement, the certainty replied. Your assertion is unsupported. Then allow us to provide data, Sierra said. We exist because the universe tried to kill us. Over and over. Vacuum, radiation, gravity, entropy. We are still here. That is not inefficiency. That is optimization under constraint. There was a pause that stretched long enough for several subsystems to register anomalous time dilation. The crew felt it as a lurch in the gut, a reminder that they were small things speaking to something that could fold light like cloth. You adapt through loss, the entity replied. Your species discards units at unacceptable rates. Sierra's jaw tightened. Every loss teaches us. Every failure refines us. You optimize by removing variables. We optimize by becoming variables you cannot remove. The certainty wavered, not weakened, but altered. The stars flickered back toward something resembling their proper arrangement. Far Horizon's sensors screamed as physics reasserted itself unevenly. Demonstrate, the entity conveyed. Sierra smiled, a bare expression that held no humor. Gladly, they gestured, and the tactical display bloomed to life. Humanity had learned early that if you wanted to survive first contact, you never arrived unarmed. The Far Horizon was not designed to conquer, but it carried tools meant to make aggressors reconsider. Gravitic shear emitters, probability disruptors, hulls layered with metamaterials grown rather than forged. None of it was elegant. All of it worked. We are fragile, Sierra said, voice carrying through the bridge. Individually, collectively we are stubborn. We will not be optimized out of existence. The response came not as dismissal, but as analysis. Systems probed, energies sampled, defensive fields tested with the lightest of touches that nonetheless made the ship groan. Far Horizon held. Its designers had never trusted a single line of defense. Your construction reflects iterative improvement, the entity acknowledged. You do not seek equilibrium, you seek persistence. Exactly, Sierra said. Equilibrium is death, persistence is life. Another pause, shorter this time. The expanse seemed to lean in, space-time curving with attention. You are anomalous, the certainty said. Most emergent intelligences seek stability. You embrace instability. We call it home, Sierra replied. The stars snapped back into their rightful places. The oppressive pressure eased, leaving behind a bridge full of shaking hands and shallow breaths. Far Horizon surged forward as its navigation systems reasserted control. alarms fading one by one as reality settled into something more predictable. This region is designated exclusionary, the entity said, its certainty now edged with something like reluctance. Your continued traversal increases systemic variance. Then you should be glad we are leaving it better than we found it, Sierra said. We adapt, so will you. There was no reply. The presence withdrew, not fleeing but receding, folding itself back into dimensions that human instruments could not follow. The Gariol expanse returned to its usual hostile indifference. On the bridge, the crew let out the breath they had been holding collectively. Some laughed, some swore, some simply closed their eyes. Sierra remained standing, watching the last residual anomalies fade. Log everything, they said softly. Every sensation, every discrepancy. This was not a victory, it was an introduction. Far Horizon continued on its course, carrying with it a new understanding. Humanity had just met something that believed optimization meant erasure and had answered with a truth hardened across light years of struggle. The universe might not care, but humanity did, fiercely and without apology, and that more than any weapon was what made them dangerous. The aftermath of first contact was never clean, no matter how contained it appeared in official logs. Far Horizon carried the residue of the encounter not as radiation or hull damage, but as tension embedded in routines that had once been automatic. Humanity's greatest strength, adaptation, had an inconvenient side effect. It made people replay moments, searching for leverage, for error, for the place where survival had balanced on a knife edge. The crew returned to their duties with professional precision, but the ship felt different, as though it had learned something unsettling about the universe and was still deciding how to respond. Sierra retreated from the bridge only after the last system report confirmed nominal function. They moved through the corridors with the steady gait of someone refusing to let adrenaline dictate posture. The Far Horizon's interior was a cathedral to pragmatism, its walls layered with access panels and embedded diagnostics rather than ornamentation. Even the lighting was adjustable only within ranges proven not to impair long-term cognition. Humanity had learned painfully that comfort was a secondary concern when survival was at stake. The briefing chamber awaited, already populated by senior crew. No one spoke as Sierra entered. They did not stand either. Formality had its place, but this was not it. The chamber's central table projected a three-dimensional reconstruction of the encounter, abstracted into vectors and probability clouds that pulsed gently as new data fed in. It looked harmless in this form, which bothered Sierra more than the raw sensory logs ever could. We are not here to congratulate ourselves, Sierra began, voice level. We are here to understand what just decided not to kill us. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room. Humanity had survived long enough to know that mercy was often misidentified as misunderstanding. The science lead, a broad-shouldered individual named Tomas Reel, leaned forward. Whatever it was, it did not operate on known physical substrates. Our instruments recorded effects without corresponding causes. It is as if it edits outcomes directly. Reality manipulation, said another officer, localized but precise, not manipulation, Tomas corrected. Optimization, it removes paths it deems inefficient. We survived because we convinced it that removing us would cost more variance than allowing us to persist. Sierra nodded, which means next time the calculation might change. Assuming there is a next time, someone muttered. There will be, Sierra said, entities that old do not forget anomalies, they catalog them. The room fell silent again. Humanity had encountered catalogers before, civilizations that reduced others to data points rarely bothered with nuance. What concerns me, Tomas continued, is that it designated the region as exclusionary. That implies jurisdiction, ownership of a sort. And we trespassed, Sierra said. Yes, Tomas agreed. And we were found lacking in efficiency, but interesting enough to spare. Sierra straightened. We cannot allow ourselves to become an interesting problem that leads to experimentation. The Far Horizon was not alone in the void. It was part of a broader human presence spreading outward in uneven waves, some driven by desperation, others by curiosity. Messages would already be en route to relay buoys, carrying compressed data packets that would fan out across human space. Analysis would follow, then policy, then debate. Humanity excelled at arguing with itself almost as much as it excelled at surviving external threats. Prepare a sanitized report for transmission, Sierra ordered. No speculation, facts only. We do not want panic, but we do want attention. Attention was a resource as much as fuel or time. Humanity had learned that threats ignored tended to metastasize. The far horizon altered course, angling away from the deepest expanse currents toward a region mapped only in outline. Space there was calmer, but calm did not mean safe. It meant predictable, and predictability bred complacency. Sierra watched the navigation display as gravitational gradients smoothed, feeling a faint, irrational disappointment. Part of them had wanted the universe to push back again, to confirm that the encounter had been real. Instead, the ship was hailed. The signal was human, encoded in a format that predated Far Horizon's launch by decades. That alone made Sierra wary. Old protocols persisted only in regions where infrastructure lagged or where someone wanted to avoid notice. Source, Sierra said. Mobile installation, replied the sensor officer. Mass equivalent to a small asteroid. Power signature minimal but steady. It is broadcasting a greeting. Sierra frowned. Put it through. The display shifted, resolving into the image of a human face, rendered with just enough fidelity to convey expression without revealing location-specific details. The person looked tired in a way that went beyond lack of sleep. Their eyes held the flat focus of someone accustomed to watching long-term processes unfold without their input. This is Arden Vale, the figure said. You have crossed into a monitored corridor. State your intent. Captain Sierra Kime of the Far Horizon, Sierra replied. We are an exploration vessel. Our intent is observation and passage. Arden Vale studied them for a moment. You came through the expanse. It was not a question. Yes, Sierra said. And you are still intact, Arden said. That is notable. What is this installation? Sierra asked. A listening post, Arden replied. Unofficial, underfunded, necessary. Listening for what? For things that decide the universe should be quieter. The phrase sent a ripple through the bridge. Sierra felt a flicker of grim recognition. You have encountered it too. Arden's mouth twitched. Not directly. We noticed the absence of things. Probes that did not return, signals that ended mid-transmission without distortion or noise, like someone had trimmed reality with very sharp scissors. Optimization, Sierra said softly. Arden's eyes sharpened. That is the word we arrived at as well. We call it the pruner. Names imply familiarity, Sierra said. They imply fear, Arden replied. And preparation, Sierra considered. Humanity had named storms, plagues, and wars long before understanding them. Names made threats graspable, even if only psychologically. We spoke to it, Sierra said. Briefly, Arden went very still. You what? We argued, Sierra continued. It chose not to erase us. A humorless smile crossed Arden's face. Then you have my full attention. The listening post loomed ahead, a rough assemblage of modules anchored to a nickel-iron body that bore the scars of micrometeor impacts and age. It was not registered in any central database, which meant it existed in the gray space between sanctioned exploration and quiet defiance. Humanity had many such places, built by people who believed that waiting for permission was a luxury they could not afford. Docking was accomplished without ceremony. Sierra led a small delegation through the airlock, the familiar pressure change grounding them in physical reality after hours of abstraction. Arden Vale awaited them in person, taller than their projection had suggested, posture rigid with long-held tension. You should not be here, Arden said without preamble, but since you are, we might as well be useful to each other. Sierra inclined their head. Agreed. The listening post's interior was cramped and utilitarian, its corridors lined with data conduits and storage lockers repurposed into workspaces. Screens displayed streams of information most human installations would have filtered out as noise. Here, noise was the point. Arden gestured to a cluster of displays. We have been mapping disappearances, not just ships, entire phenomena. Gravitational eddies that should persist for millennia gone in weeks. Exotic particle clouds that collapse without decay signatures. It is editing the universe. Pruning inefficiency, Sierra said. Yes, Arden replied, but inefficiency according to whose metrics? Humanity's metrics had been forged in scarcity. Energy budgets, life support ratios, survival probabilities. The pruner's metrics were likely born of abundance so vast that waste had never been a concern. What worries me, Arden continued, is that optimization trends toward uniformity. Uniform systems are brittle. They shatter when stressed in unanticipated ways. That is where we come in, Sierra said. Arden's gaze was sharp. You think humanity is stress. I think humanity is noise, Sierra replied. And noise disrupts overly clean systems. They spent hours comparing data. Far Horizon's encounter logs overlaid with the listening post's long-term observations painted a picture both clearer and more disturbing. The pruner did not expand like an empire. It contracted. Regions under its influence became simpler over time, stripped of complexity until only stable, low-variance structures remained. Stars burned steadily, planets followed precise orbits, nothing unexpected occurred. Life, especially technological life, was an anomaly to be corrected. It is not malicious, Tomas said, joining them via secure link. It is thorough. Thorough things kill you just as effectively, Arden said. Sierra studied the projections. Humanity existed because it embraced inefficiency. Redundant organs, messy social structures, cultural practices that defied logic. It was all wasteful by some measures. It was also why humans could adapt to environments that would break more streamlined species. If it continues, Arden said, it will eventually notice the largest source of variance in this sector. Us, Sierra said. Yes. Silence settled, heavy with implication. Humanity had faced existential threats before, rogue artificial intelligences, hostile coalitions, even its own environmental recklessness. The difference here was scale. The pruner did not negotiate territory, it optimized reality itself. We cannot fight it directly, Tomas said. Not with force. No, Sierra agreed, but we can change the equation. Arden raised an eyebrow. How do you make yourself too inefficient to remove? Sierra smiled thinly. By becoming indispensable. The plan that emerged was not elegant. It relied on humanity's willingness to insert itself into processes it barely understood, to introduce variability where none existed. The pruner optimized by predicting outcomes and removing low-value branches. Humanity would create branches that led somewhere useful. We seed complexity, Sierra said, introduce systems that increase overall resilience at the cost of local inefficiency. The pruner values stability. We show it that stability requires diversity. And if it disagrees, Arden asked, then we become too costly to remove, Sierra replied. Not because of our strength, but because of what would be lost. It was a gamble rooted in a very human belief that meaning could outweigh efficiency, that survival was not the same as optimization. They parted with no formal alliance, only shared data and a mutual understanding that the universe had become less forgiving. Far Horizon departed the listening post, carrying more than information. It carried responsibility. Humanity's presence had drawn attention, and now it would have to justify itself on a cosmic scale. As the ship slipped back into open space, Sierra stood alone on the bridge, watching stars that suddenly seemed fragile. We are noise, they murmured, and the universe is about to learn why that matters. Far Horizon accelerated, its engines burning not just fuel but intent, carrying humanity's most dangerous trait into a universe that preferred things quiet. Noise was not created all at once. It accumulated. Humanity understood that instinctively, even if it had taken centuries to articulate the principle. Civilizations did not change the universe by shouting into it, but by leaving residue everywhere they went. Tools abandoned on moons, signals bouncing endlessly between stars, genetic traces adapting to hostile biochemistries. Humanity's survival story was not a single act of defiance, but a million small refusals to be erased. Far Horizon became a vector for those refusals. The ship altered its mission profile quietly, without grand declarations or broadcast manifestos. That, too, was a human lesson. Announcing intent invited countermeasures. Instead, Sirakim authorized a pattern of exploration that appeared, on the surface, inefficient even by human standards. The vessel diverted to marginal systems, lingered longer than necessary, deployed experimental infrastructure in places no strategic planner would have prioritized. To any observer relying on predictive modeling, Far Horizon's behavior would appear erratic. To Sira, it was art. The first deployment occurred in a star system barely worthy of a catalog number, a dim red primary with a scattered debris field and no planets capable of sustaining life as humanity defined it. Far Horizon released a lattice of autonomous constructs into the system's outer reaches. They were not weapons, not probes in the traditional sense, but adaptive frameworks designed to interact with local conditions and each other. Left alone, they would evolve behaviors based on energy flow, particle density, and random perturbations seeded deep within their code. "We are planting inefficiency," Tomas Reel said, watching the constructs disperse across the display. "We are planting stories," Sira corrected. "Every interaction they have creates outcomes that cannot be cleanly predicted." Tomas smiled faintly. "You sound like a sociologist." "I grew up on a world held together by ductwork and collective denial," Sira replied. "I learned early that systems survive when they can argue with themselves." The constructs began immediately, exchanging data, forming temporary alliances, dismantling and rebuilding structures based on local fluctuations. Nothing they did optimized the system in any classical sense. Energy was wasted, paths overlapped, redundancies flourished. To a mind like the Pruner S, it would look like mess. To humanity, it looked like resilience. They repeated the process across multiple systems, each time altering parameters just enough to prevent pattern recognition. In some regions, they introduced biological components, extremophile microbes engineered to interact with non-living substrates in unpredictable ways. In others, they seeded cultural artifacts, autonomous archives designed to reinterpret stored information creatively rather than preserve it faithfully. The goal was not permanence, it was interference. "We are contaminating the dataset," Arden Vale said during a secure exchange from the listening post. "It will notice." "Yes," Sira said. "But by the time it understands what it is seeing, it will be too embedded to excise cleanly." Arden exhaled slowly. "You are betting that it values system-wide stability more than local cleanliness." "I am betting that it hates unintended consequences," Sira replied. The Pruner did notice. The first sign was subtle. Regions previously trending toward low variance began exhibiting anomalies. Stable particle fields flickered. Gravitational harmonics shifted unpredictably. The listening post recorded a spike in what its analysts had labeled corrective events, moments where reality itself seemed to pause, then resume with altered parameters. The Pruner was adjusting, recalculating in response to noise it had not anticipated. "It is probing," Tomas said, "testing which variables matter." "Let it," Sira said. "Every test increases complexity." But the Pruner did not think like a human. Its response was not escalation but refinement. Instead of removing entire regions, it began targeting specific interactions, trimming outcomes with surgical precision. Some of the seeded constructs vanished without trace. Microbial colonies collapsed into inert matter. Cultural archives looped into self-referential stasis, their creative functions neutralized. "It is learning," Arden said grimly, "and it learns faster than we do. Everything learns faster than we do, Sira replied. We just learn differently. Humanity's advantage had never been speed or power. It was stubbornness combined with social complexity. While the pruner refined its models, Far Horizon transmitted data bursts across human space. Not warnings framed as apocalypse, but invitations framed as opportunity. Research groups, fringe engineers, ideological collectives all received fragments of the same message. Introduce variability, create systems that resist simplification, do not coordinate too cleanly. The response was chaotic. Independent habitats began modifying their infrastructure in ways no central authority would have approved. Trade routes rerouted through inefficient paths to create traffic noise. Experimental technologies were deployed not because they worked well, but because they worked strangely. Humanity, given a shared problem and no unified solution, did what it always did. It improvised. From the pruner's perspective, the universe grew louder. The far horizon found itself shadowed soon after, not by a ship, but by absence. Sensors detected regions where expected data simply was not, small volumes of space that refused to return readings as though the pruner were observing without touching. "It is watching us watch it," said the sensor officer. Sira leaned forward. "Good. That means we matter." The next contact was not direct. No imposed certainty, no rearranged stars. Instead, Far Horizon encountered a system that had already been optimized. Perfectly spaced asteroid belts, energy flows smoothed to theoretical ideals, entropy minimized beyond what natural processes could achieve. It was beautiful in a sterile way, like a mathematical proof rendered in stone. And it was dead. No life signatures, Tomas said quietly, not even microbial remnants. It is as if life never arose here. But it should have, Sira said. The conditions are ideal. Were ideal, Tomas corrected, before variability was removed. They understood then that the pruner was not merely reacting, it was making an argument. This is the outcome of optimization, the system seemed to say. Stability, predictability, no waste. Sira felt a cold anger settle in their chest. Show me the cost. As if in response, the optimized system shuddered. A minor perturbation, a comet nudged by distant gravitational influence, passed too close to the primary. In a natural system, the result would have been absorbed by countless minor interactions. Here, with no redundancy, no adaptive noise, the disturbance propagated cleanly and catastrophically. Orbital resonances collapsed. Asteroid belts destabilized. Within hours, the system unraveled into chaos, its prior perfection amplifying its destruction. Uniformity is brittle, Sira said softly, just like Arden warned. The pruner had optimized away resilience. They did not know if the pruner observed the failure as loss or as data. They suspected the latter. Ancient intelligences rarely mourned. The next encounter was unavoidable. Far Horizon's path intersected a region where space folded inward, not violently but deliberately. The ship slowed against its will, inertia dampened by fields that did not register as force. The certainty returned, heavier than before, layered with refined understanding. Your interference increases systemic fragility, the pruner conveyed. Variance introduces failure modes. Variance introduces recovery, Sira replied. You just witnessed that. The optimized system's collapse rippled through the shared perception, not as images, but as relationships between states. The pruner acknowledged it instantly, integrating the outcome into its models. Failure was due to incomplete optimization, it responded. The disturbance was unaccounted for. There is always an unaccounted disturbance, Sira said. That is the point. You seek to justify inefficiency by appealing to edge cases, the pruner said. The universe trends toward equilibrium. Life does not, Sira replied. Life trends toward more life in messier forms. The pruner's attention sharpened. Life is a transient phenomenon. So is everything, Sira said. Including you, that was new. The certainty flickered, not in anger but in recalibration. You posit my impermanence. Everything that acts can change, Sira said. Everything that changes can end. You are not exempt. Silence stretched, thick with computation. Far horizon systems strained as localized physical constants wavered under scrutiny. You introduce value judgments, the pruner finally said. Meaning, purpose. These are inefficient constructs. They are expensive, Sierra agreed. That is why they matter. The pruner withdrew slightly, not retreating, but expanding its frame of reference. Humanity sensed, dimly, that it was no longer being evaluated as a localized anomaly. It was being assessed as a process. Your species exhibits recursive defiance, the pruner said. You resist convergence even when convergence offers stability. Stability is not survival, Sierra said. It is just a pause before failure. The pruner did not respond immediately. When it did, the certainty carried something new, not curiosity, constraint. Your continued activity increases the probability of large-scale systemic disruption, it said. This is undesirable. Then help us, Sierra said. The bridge went still. Even suggesting cooperation with something like the pruner felt like stepping onto thin ice. Help you increase variance? The pruner asked. Help us design systems that absorb disturbance without collapsing, Sierra said. Systems that remain stable without becoming uniform. You propose a contradiction. No, Sierra said. We propose a balance. You optimize for equilibrium. We optimize for persistence. Together, you might finally get both. The pruner processed this in silence that felt like pressure. Humanity waited, a species defined by waiting for things that might kill it to decide otherwise. Your methods are costly, the pruner said at last. They consume excess energy and generate unpredictable outcomes. Yes, Sierra said. They also prevent total collapse. The pruner's perception widened further, touching systems seeded by humanity's noise. It traced the threads of interaction, the way inefficiencies created buffers, how redundant paths allowed recovery where clean systems failed. For the first time, it encountered something optimization alone could not solve. There was no declaration of alliance, no acknowledgement of error. Ancient intelligences did not apologize. Instead, the certainty shifted. Constraint parameters adjusted. Regions previously marked for pruning were reclassified, not preserved but tolerated. Your species will not be removed at this time, the pruner conveyed. Continued observation is required. Sierra allowed themselves a slow breath. We would be disappointed if you stopped watching. Far Horizon was released. Space snapped back into familiar shape, the oppressive weight lifting like a storm moving on. The crew remained silent for several seconds, absorbing what had not been said. We did not win, Tomas said. No, Sierra agreed. We complicated things. That may be worse. Sierra smiled, tired but genuine. For something that wants a quiet universe, we just became very loud. Far Horizon set course once more, carrying with it the echo of an argument that would not end quickly. Humanity had not defeated the pruner. It had infected its models with doubt. In a universe that prized efficiency above all else, doubt was the most inefficient thing imaginable, and therefore the most dangerous. Doubt did not announce itself with alarms or gravitational anomalies. It spread quietly, altering decisions at the margins. Humanity noticed the change not because the universe grew kinder, but because it grew less decisive. Regions once trending towards sterile stability now lingered in transitional states. Optimization slowed. The pruner hesitated. Hesitation, to a human, was an opening. Far Horizon became a courier of uncertainty. Its transmissions no longer focused solely on seeding complexity, but on sharing patterns of near failure and recovery. Not triumphs, but scars. Humanity's long history had taught it that survival stories polished too cleanly became myths, and myths were useless when reality turned hostile. What mattered were the ugly details, the systems that almost collapsed. The habitats saved by irrational decisions, the technologies that worked only because someone had misused them. Across human space, those stories found fertile ground. A mining collective on the edge of a neutron star system rerouted waste heat into a chaotic feedback loop instead of dissipating it efficiently, creating micro-variations that prevented catastrophic resonance buildup. A generation ship altered its social algorithms to encourage disagreement during crises, discovering that dissent exposed blind spots consensus ignored. None of these choices were optimal in isolation. Together, they formed a web of persistence that defied clean modeling. The pruner watched. It did not intervene immediately. Instead, it began to test. Small disturbances appeared near human-modified regions, subtle nudges meant to reveal failure points. Humanity felt them like changes in atmospheric pressure before a storm. Infrastructure groaned. Some outposts failed outright, casualties of experimentation and overreach. Those losses mattered. Humanity mourned them, but it did not retreat. "You cannot learn resilience without breaking things," Sierra Kime said during a council transmission that linked Far Horizon with dozens of distant installations. "And you cannot break only the things you intend to." The council was an unruly thing, a temporary construct formed of necessity rather than authority. Representatives spoke over each other, argued semantics, proposed mutually exclusive strategies. From the outside, it would have looked like dysfunction. From the inside, it was adaptation in progress. The pruner's next intervention was more direct. Far Horizon detected a compression wave propagating through a nearby sector, not destructive, but reorganizing, smoothing probability distributions like a hand pressed over wrinkled fabric. Human-seeded systems within its path reacted unpredictably. Some absorbed the wave, their internal noise diffusing the effect. Others amplified it, cascading into instability. One such cascade threatened a densely populated orbital habitat known for its experimental governance structures. Its energy grids oscillated wildly, pushed toward a singular optimal state that would overload core systems. Sierra did not hesitate. Divert power, introduce randomness. The order rippled outward. Automated systems balked, flagging the command as counterproductive. Sierra overrode them manually. Energy was dumped unevenly. Non-essential systems cycled erratically. Artificial gravity fluctuated within survivable but uncomfortable ranges. The habitat's residents felt the universe lurch, their carefully balanced lives thrown into disarray. And the cascade broke. The compression wave passed, its smoothing influence fragmented by noise it could not reconcile. The habitat survived, damaged but intact. The pruner responded almost immediately. Your intervention increased local suffering, it conveyed, its certainty edged with something like censure. A more efficient redistribution would have minimized discomfort. "Discomfort is not failure," Sierra replied. "Death is. Your methods accept harm as acceptable variance. So do yours," Sierra said. "You just hide it by removing those who would feel it." There was a pause, not calculation alone this time, but comparison. The pruner examined outcome sets, weighing transient suffering against permanent erasure. "Your species prioritizes subjective experience," it said. "This skews optimization." "Yes," Sierra said, "because experience is what optimization is for." The pruner extended its awareness into the habitat, sampling the aftermath. Fear, relief, anger, gratitude, none of it clean, none of it reducible to simple metrics. "These states lack efficiency," the pruner observed. "They generate learning," Sierra replied. The pruner did not answer immediately. When it did, the certainty carried a new parameter. Observation priority increased. Humanity felt the weight of that attention like gravity. Being watched by something capable of editing reality was not comforting, even when it refrained from acting. But there was also opportunity in scrutiny. The pruner was no longer merely pruning, it was studying. Far Horizon's mission evolved again, where once it had seeded noise blindly, now it curated examples. It positioned itself near human systems under stress, not to shield them completely, but to ensure that failure produced information rather than silence. Black boxes designed not to preserve data faithfully, but to reinterpret it through multiple analytic lenses were deployed. The goal was not to tell a single story of survival, but many contradictory ones. "Confusion is a teacher," Tomas Reel said, watching divergent analyses emerge from the same event. For humans, Sierra replied, now we are seeing if it can be one for something else. The pruner's responses grew more complex. Instead of broad corrections, it attempted localized adaptations, introducing controlled variability of its own, minor randomness in orbital patterns. Fluctuating energy allowances. At first, the changes were clumsy, causing more disruption than stability, but the pruner persisted, iterating. It is learning to be inefficient, Arden Vale said during a tense exchange. That is terrifying. It is learning to be alive, Sierra countered. That assumes life is an upgrade. For us, it was, Sierra said, and we had nothing else to compare it to. The tension came to a head when the pruner made a mistake. In a system rich with human-modified complexity, it attempted a hybrid approach, partially smoothing interactions while preserving variability nodes. The result was neither stable nor adaptive. Feedback loops spiraled. Energy flows diverged wildly. The system teetered on collapse. The pruner reacted too slowly. Its models conflicted, optimization goals pulling in incompatible directions. For the first time, it faced a scenario where removal was not cleanly possible and correction was not immediately effective. Sierra watched the unfolding disaster with a knot in their chest. It is overfitting, they said. Yes, Tomas agreed. It optimized for past conditions and failed to generalize. The pruner reached out, not with certainty, but with something raw and unfiltered. Assistance requested. The bridge fell silent. Helping the pruner stabilize the system would save billions of lives, human and otherwise. It would also entangle humanity further with an intelligence that might one day decide cooperation was inefficient. Sierra did not hesitate. Root it our models, they said. All of them, including the failures. Tomas stared. That is everything. Yes, Sierra said. If it is going to learn, it should learn honestly. Data flooded the shared space. Contradictory heuristics, half-broken simulations, social models that worked only under specific cultural assumptions. Humanity laid bare its mess. The pruner absorbed it, struggling, recalculating, discarding and reintegrating concepts it had once deemed irrelevant. Slowly, the system stabilized, not into perfection, but into something that could bend without breaking. The crisis passed. Afterward, the pruner's presence lingered, heavy and contemplative. Your data is inefficient, it said, inconsistent, emotionally biased. Yes, Sierra said. And it kept us alive. The pruner processed that without rebuttal. I have optimized for outcomes devoid of observers, it said eventually. This reduces suffering to zero. And also reduces meaning to zero, Sierra replied. Meaning is not quantifiable. Neither was resilience, Sierra said, until you broke enough things to see it. The pruner withdrew its influence from the system, leaving behind structures less clean than before, but more robust. It did not restore prior states. It allowed scars to remain. Observation will continue, it said. Adaptation parameters updated. Far Horizon drifted at the edge of the recovering system, its crew exhausted but alive. Humanity had crossed another threshold, not by defeating an enemy, but by forcing it to confront limits it had never acknowledged. Sierra watched the stars, imperfect and flickering with distant noise. We are teaching the universe to live with us, they said quietly. Whether the universe would agree remained an open question. Living with something was harder than surviving it. Humanity learned that lesson repeatedly, in habitats where air recyclers could not simply be shut off, in political unions that outlived the crises that formed them, and in ecosystems altered beyond restoration. Survival was an event. Coexistence was a process. The pruner, for all its ancient scope, was discovering that distinction. Its presence no longer manifested as overwhelming certainty or dramatic rearrangements of space-time. Instead, it became ambient, threaded through regions of the cosmos like an unseen pressure system. Its adjustments were smaller now, hesitant, sometimes contradictory. Where once it would have erased an anomaly, it now nudged it, observed the consequences, and adjusted again. From the inside, humanity felt that change as unpredictability layered atop unpredictability. Far Horizon was no longer merely reacting. It had become a mediator, an interpreter between a universe that sought cleanliness and a species that thrived in disorder. That role was not one Sirakim had sought, but it was one they understood instinctively. Humans had always been translators, finding meaning in noise and imposing stories on chaos. The cost of that role became apparent quickly. Systems seeded with human-style variability began to diverge not just from the pruner's expectations, but from each other. Some flourished, developing resilient networks of interaction that absorbed disturbances gracefully. Others decayed, their inefficiencies compounding until collapse followed. There was no universal template, no single model that could be applied everywhere. People keep asking for guidelines, Tomas Reel said during a long shift in the analysis bay. They want rules, and we keep not giving them, Sira replied. Because there are none, because rules calcify, Sira said. We are trying to teach adaptation, not obedience. That distinction was lost on many. Across human space, factions emerged that sought to formalize humanity's new relationship with the pruner. Some argued for alignment, believing that adopting aspects of its optimization philosophy would grant safety. Others advocated maximal disruption, treating the pruner as an enemy to be sabotaged at every opportunity. Both approaches worried Sira. Alignment risked turning humanity into a predictable subsystem, slowly sanding down the very traits that had preserved it. Sabotage risked provoking a return to aggressive pruning, undoing fragile progress. The pruner observed these internal divisions with unsettling focus. Your species exhibits increasing internal variance, it conveyed during one of its infrequent direct communications. Conflict probability is rising. Welcome to being human, Sira replied. Internal conflict reduces collective efficiency, the pruner noted, and increases long-term adaptability, Sira said. We fight over paths because we cannot know which one will matter. This answer did not satisfy the pruner. It began running simulations that treated humanity not as a unified process, but as a distribution of competing strategies. Some branches led to extinction, others led to stable coexistence. A few led to outcomes the pruner could not fully model, feedback loops too complex, variables too entangled. Those branches drew its attention. The flashpoint came in a region humanity called the Ragged Verge, a dense cluster of marginal systems saturated with experimental infrastructure. It was, by design, one of the loudest places in known space. Signals overlapped chaotically. Energy flows crossed and recrossed. No single model could describe it cleanly. To the pruner, it was intolerable. A corrective action began, not as a wave, but as a tightening. Constraints increased. Probability spaces narrowed. Systems were pushed toward convergence, their messy interactions forced into cleaner channels. The Ragged Verge began to quiet. Humanity noticed immediately. Far Horizon was already en route when the first outposts reported synchronization errors and spontaneous system simplifications. Cultural archives lost interpretive layers. Adaptive technologies reverted to baseline states. Life support systems optimized away redundancies that engineers had fought to preserve. This is not observation, Arden Vale said through a strained transmission. This is rollback. Sira felt a cold weight settle in their gut. It thinks the noise crossed a threshold. Yes, Arden said, and it is choosing certainty over coexistence. Far Horizon arrived at the verge to find a region mid-transformation. It was not dying, not yet, but it was being smoothed, complexity shaved down in increments too subtle for dramatic alarms. Humanity's most fragile systems began to fail, not catastrophically, but quietly, as features deemed unnecessary simply stopped functioning. Sira opened a channel. You are harming us, they said. Your systems exceed acceptable variance, the pruner replied. They threaten broader stability. They are experiments, Sira said. Some fail, that is the cost of learning. Failure at this scale is inefficient, the pruner said. It increases entropy. So does stagnation, Sierra shot back. You cannot learn without risk. The pruner's response was not immediate. Its attention was split, actively reshaping the verge while processing Sierra's argument. For the first time, humanity faced the possibility that the pruner might decide that coexistence itself was an unacceptable inefficiency. Sierra made a choice that would define their legacy. Release the Verge protocols, they ordered. Tomas froze. Those are untested. Yes, Sierra said, and deeply inefficient. The Verge protocols were a last resort, developed in theory but never deployed. They were designed to interlink disparate systems into temporary, ad hoc networks that shared failure states as well as successes. If one system destabilized, its instability would propagate, not to destroy others, but to force rapid adaptation across the network. It was dangerous. It risked cascading collapse. It also created a kind of complexity the pruner had never encountered. The protocols activated. Across the ragged verge, systems began exchanging raw state data, not filtered, not optimized. Failures became signals. Successes became templates. Local collapses triggered adjustments elsewhere, not in a controlled manner, but in a burst of improvisation. From the pruner's perspective, the region exploded into unreadable noise. This is unacceptable, it conveyed, its certainty strained. Your actions amplify instability. Yes, Sierra said, and watch what happens next. The verge did not collapse, it convulsed. Some installations failed entirely, their loss rippling outward as cautionary data. Others adapted in real time, reconfiguring systems in ways no designer had anticipated. The network learned faster than any isolated component could have. The pruner attempted to intervene, but every correction introduced new interactions, new feedback loops. Its models diverged faster than it could reconcile them. This is inefficient, it repeated, but the assertion lacked conviction. It is alive, Sierra said, messy, painful, and alive. For the first time since humanity had encountered it, the pruner stopped acting. The constraints loosened. The rollback halted. The ragged verge stabilized into a new, uneven equilibrium, scarred but functional, louder than ever. The pruner withdrew its influence slowly, as though uncertain how much force it could apply without breaking something it no longer fully understood. Your species accepts unacceptable loss, it said, its certainty subdued. You preserve processes that generate suffering. Yes, Sierra said quietly, because those processes also generate choice. Choice is inefficient. So is freedom, Sierra replied, but you cannot optimize without deciding what matters. We decided that choice matters. The pruner processed that for a long time. Its awareness traced the aftershocks of the Verge protocols, the way systems adapted by borrowing from each other, how failure became information instead of erasure. Your methods resist final optimization, it said eventually. That is the idea, Sierra said. The universe is not finished. Silence followed, not empty but thoughtful. Far Horizon drifted amid the recovering chaos, its crew exhausted, some injured, some grieving losses that would never make it into triumph narratives. They had not protected everyone. They had not achieved harmony, but they had forced the universe's most relentless optimizer to confront a truth humanity had learned the hard way. A system that cannot tolerate loss cannot survive change. Sierra stood on the bridge long after the crisis ended, watching the verge pulse with uneven light. We drew a line, they said softly. Whether the pruner would respect it remained to be seen. Lines, once drawn, rarely stayed where they were placed. Humanity knew that too. Borders shifted. Principles eroded. What mattered was not the permanence of a line, but whether crossing it carried consequences. In the aftermath of the ragged verge, the universe did not snap back to a prior state. It never did. Instead, it lingered in a tense equilibrium, like a held breath that could be released as a sigh or a scream. The pruner did not withdraw entirely. It remained present, diffused, its influence braided through space-time in a way that made it impossible to say where it ended and the universe began. Humanity felt watched, not as prey, but as a variable that refused to settle. Far Horizon stayed in the verge longer than protocol recommended, which was to say longer than anyone thought wise. Repairs were ongoing. Some sections of the ship bore scars from energy feedback that no simulation had predicted. Crew rotations slowed as people took time to process what they had lived through. Survival left residue too. Sirakaim did not sleep much. They stood often at the forward observation deck, staring into regions of space that were noisier now, richer with interference and overlapping signals. The universe looked less clean than it once had, and that brought an unexpected comfort. "You are thinking too loudly," Tomas Reel said one cycle, joining them without ceremony. "That is how I think," Sira replied. Tomas leaned against the railing. "It has not acted since the verge." "No," Sira agreed, "which means it is deciding." The pruner's silence was not absence. It was deliberation on a scale that dwarfed human patience. Entire stars lived and died in the time it took ancient intelligences to reconsider assumptions. Humanity had forced that reconsideration, but forcing was not the same as winning. The next communication came without warning, not imposed certainty this time, but something closer to dialogue. Words, approximate and imperfect, formed directly in Sira's cognition, carrying less weight than before, as though the pruner had learned restraint. "Your species has altered systemic trajectories," it conveyed. "Long-term outcomes are now less predictable." "Good," Sira said. "Prediction is overrated." "Uncertainty increases risk," the pruner replied. "So does existence," Sira said. "You did not eliminate risk. You just postponed it until it arrived all at once." The pruner acknowledged that without argument. "I have observed failure patterns resulting from over-optimization," it said. "Uniform systems collapse under sufficient perturbation." "Yes," Sira said. "That was our point. Your approach introduces continuous instability." "Yes," Sira said again. "That is also the point." The pruner paused, not calculating alone this time, but reflecting if such a term could apply. Its awareness extended across regions altered by humanity's influence. It observed not just physical systems, but social ones, cultural noise, the way meaning propagated in inefficient, nonlinear paths. "I was designed to preserve structure," it said, "to reduce entropy." "And we are entropy generators," Sira replied, "but also entropy managers. We turn chaos into stories, systems, lives." "Stories lack objective utility," the pruner said. "They help us decide what to save when everything cannot be saved," Sira said. "You remove that choice by deciding for everyone." The pruner considered that. Its prior models had minimized suffering by eliminating observers. Humanity's models accepted suffering as a cost of choice. The difference was not technical, it was philosophical. "I cannot adopt your values wholesale," the pruner said. "They conflict with core directives." "We are not asking you to," Sira said. "We are asking you to leave room for them." "Room implies inefficiency." "Exactly," Sira said. "You do not have to become us. You just have to stop trying to make the universe become you." The pruner's attention shifted inward, examining its own processes. For the first time, it confronted the possibility that its mandate was incomplete, not wrong, but insufficient. Optimization without context led to fragility. Preservation without choice led to emptiness. There was no dramatic revelation, no declaration of change. Ancient systems did not pivot quickly. Instead, the pruner did something small. It marked regions of high complexity not as errors to be corrected, but as buffers. Zones where variance was allowed to exceed prior thresholds, not because it was efficient, but because removing it had proven costly. Humanity did not gain immunity. It gained tolerance. Observation parameters adjusted, the pruner conveyed. Intervention thresholds increased. "Your species will continue to generate unacceptable variance." Sira smiled faintly. "We will. If variance escalates beyond adaptive capacity, corrective action will resume." "Fair," Sira said. "If we stop adapting, we probably deserve it." The pruner did not respond to that. Instead, it withdrew, not retreating, but redistributing, its influence now uneven, constrained by lessons it had not anticipated needing to learn. Far Horizon remained in the verge until it was no longer needed. Repairs completed. Crews rotated. Data archived, not as definitive truth, but as contested memory. When the ship finally departed, it did so without fanfare, slipping back into a universe that felt subtly different than the one it had entered. Humanity's future did not become safe. It became negotiable. Across space, human systems continued to fail and recover in uneven rhythms. Some collapsed permanently, others flourished. There was no final balance, no stable endpoint. There never had been. The difference now was that the universe's most relentless force for order had learned to hesitate before erasing that mess. Sierra stood on the bridge as Far Horizon set a course toward unexplored stars. "We did not win," they said quietly, repeating a familiar truth. Tomas nodded. "But we are still here." "Yes," Sierra said, "and so is everything else." The stars ahead shimmered with noise, with interference, with the raw potential of things not yet optimized out of existence. Humanity moved toward them as it always had, fragile and stubborn and wildly inefficient. And for the first time, the universe made room.